Welcome back to our exploration of the fascinating life of Alvar Aalto, the visionary architect whose legacy continues to inspire. In this new chapter, we delve deeper into Aalto's journey, uncovering pivotal moments, iconic designs, and the enduring impact of his work. Join us as we uncover the remarkable story of Alvar Aalto and his enduring influence on the world of architecture. As we told before, here enters another character into the story, the one who rescues architects. It's often the case that women come to his rescue in the end, and this time was no different. From 49 to 52, Alvar Aalto faced three incredibly challenging years. While he managed to complete Sinat Salo with immense effort, so much so that he personally wrote a heartfelt letter to each of the 6 bricklayers who had worked on the project, thanking them for their contribution. His studio was in complete crisis. One day he noticed they had installed a neon sign outside the building, and in his indignation he smashed it to pieces. This led to a legal battle and hefty fines he had to pay. Additionally, a tax inspection revealed his accounts were in disarray, resulting in more substantial penalties. He had to let go of half of his staff, and it felt like his life was heading towards disaster. However, amidst all this turmoil, he discovered another young architect, an employee in his studio who was 24 years his junior. He ended up with Otaniemi, whom he immediately renamed Elisa because it had a more classical resonance, and married her. From then on, he found a new kind of happiness, different from what he had with Eno. Eno was more reflective, perhaps more mature and settled, while Elisa was vibrant and joyous, seeking only to live life without worries. This brought a new energy to Aalto, and they began a different life together, reflected in their architecture. As was his custom, Aalto built a vacation home as a wedding gift, this time next to Sinat Salo near the town hall. He often visited the area during its construction and decided to create a vacation home, a simple yet elegant structure with a large courtyard adorned with whitewashed brick walls and a central fireplace. There's Alvar Aalto tending to the fire at the heart of the courtyard of Murat Salo's vacation home. And there you have the young Elisa, because she wanted to love always, just as Aalto did, in the same enclosure. The same enclosure, which was this open-air patio. You see, the house is barely a patio, an L-shaped structure with rooms, and then it gradually dissolves. This drawing, in which the house almost decomposes like a ruin, is one of the most beautiful in the history of architecture. They used it as the logo, the plan of that house that dissolves and eventually breaks down like a ruin in the landscape, blending into nature. This is the patio where he was tending to the fire and she was busy with the furniture. This is the patio, a brick patio, but painted white on the outside. Yet it has that warm atmosphere. Here, the landscape is open, an open courtyard, an unclosed courtyard, something so completely un-Nordic, as the Nordics always make things prism-like, enclosed. No, a courtyard is something from southern architecture. He made a southern courtyard next to a Finnish lake, and then, of course, his experiments utilize that wall you've seen several times already to test all sorts of ceramic products that would later appear in his work here and there. But he used his experimental house like doctors who experiment on themselves, saying, "Well, since this is my house, if I make a mistake, it's okay." He employed about 20 types of masonry to see which one would be best to use in the future. And this is the plan of that experimental wall. In fact, he didn't call it a summer house. He called it an experimental house, where that textile condition they were experimenting with spread so much through art. Because he made furniture, but there were textiles that Eno designed, and it would be present in many of his works, such as later in the pension building that we will see. He used these colorful ceramic pieces to build structures that gave the impression of being woven rather than constructed. A somewhat remote sauna, One has to cross a stretch of forest to reach it, and this sauna, as you can see, it's almost like Le Corbusier's cabin, this sauna, like the most deliberately primitive element of the house because it's effectively a huge architectural creature, a spontaneous creation, a house without foundation because it's supported only on a few rocks, and a sauna where, even though it may not seem like an Aalto building, Aalto's talent is reflected in small details, in little nuances. He adored vernacular architecture. Whenever he traveled, he only wanted to see vernacular architecture. So what was Alvar Aalto like when he was in Spain? These are the drawings he made. He was taken to the Prado Museum and he said, "I'm not interested." They took him to the Escorial and he turned around. Spanish writers were amazed. Then in 1951, many of them wrote about him. They had met the great Aalto and they all had to leave a mark of what they had seen. Chueca said he was like a peasant. He didn't understand. He had the face of a peasant and the tastes of a peasant. He was only interested in the vernacular. This is what he drew in Spain. He was only interested in native architecture because he thought that in that poetry, in that architecture made out of necessity, out of the constructions of matter and chance, there was the most genuine architecture. And yet, he had an uncompromising eye for the most exquisite. When Chueca took him to buy gifts for the family, it was at a castanet store. They showed him many, and without hesitation he picked up some. I was scandalized. We're talking about the year 1951. Think about it. But they cost 600 pesetas, he said. Why not the professional castanets? They were the most sophisticated in the store. He said, "Take any ones for 6 pesetas, you can get some castanets." Aalto, delighted, had the eye to see among those castanets, which were undoubtedly the best, and he didn't mind setting aside 600 pesetas from 1951 to get some professional castanets. So he liked the vernacular but had a refined eye in which he always knew how to find the best. And at that time, he was at odds with his country, at odds indeed. This boat was designed, as you can see, with a somewhat amphibious air to go to the little island of Muratsalo, where his experimental house was located, to go to his vacation home. And he gave this boat a name that is very revealing, Nemo Propheta in Patria. No one is a prophet in their own country. He used to say, "They don't want me in Finland. I'm an outcast. In the United States, in Europe, everyone reveres me. I go there. I'm a hero. And in Finland, Nemo Propheta in Patria. No one is a prophet in their own country." And that was true to some extent. At that moment, it's true, he had won 2 major competitions and neither was moving forward. 4 years had passed, and things were still at a standstill. But suddenly, both projects began to progress. 2 significant works in Helsinki, one downtown and the other very close by, next to Tapiola, the Polytechnic University. One was the Pension Institute, a building crafted with bronze cladding and brick, a remarkable structure where, once again, he designed every detail, just as he had done in Paimio. Every piece of furniture, every lamp. He designed 12 or 14 different types of lamps anew. With the cliff and the suns, the reading wells, the libraries, and the grand luminous plains of the skylights. But also with the extraordinary design of these, always with the zenith light of these small cubicles, to provide privacy to those who went there to resolve everyday matters because it was a large administrative building to solve the problems of the pensioners. So it was very important to him. Dignity, privacy, and refinement with which the administration of this pension fund caters to its pensioners. The other major building of the time was the Otaniemi University of Technology, located on a peninsula near Helsinki, just 10 to 15 kilometers away. It comprised a vast complex of buildings, again constructed with his signature brick, characteristic of this period of Aalto's work. He designed it as a true city of knowledge, dominated by a classical amphitheater reminiscent of the theater of Epidaurus, a testament to his enduring love for the classical world. Almost everything was made of brick, except for one building that he clad in Italian marble. Why? Because the School of Architecture, just like Mies in the Illinois Institute of Technology, had its main hall covered in marble. While Aalto couldn't make it bigger, he made sure to clad the facade in marble as a nod to the architectural tradition. There was a certain romanticism in this, a reverence for the profession, a point of pride for architects. This is the main plan, showcasing the main auditorium and the smaller one. The smaller auditorium is the one featured in those volumes of the School of Architecture. As you can see in the drawings, he is referencing the ancient world, specifically ancient Rome. This is the grand auditorium, one of Aalto's most powerful images. So they were often made with these sections that allowed natural light to enter all of them. Of course, Aalto suddenly acquired recognition with our two colossal buildings, but the surprise came when Aalto, who was seen as the architect of the powerful, the big industrialists of the state, of the church, was commissioned the headquarters of the Communist Party. And they said, "How can this be?" No one understood it at the time. The Communist Party of Finland was very influential because the Russians essentially controlled Finland. It wielded extraordinary power in Finland, and this was to be the Communist Party's headquarters, a massive block of offices and a grand auditorium in a house of culture. Later, he would go to Moscow, paying his respects to those who were exercising this sort of colonial dominance. Not entirely, because it had a status somewhat like Austria's neutrality, but also protection. These were countries that couldn't join NATO because they formed a buffer zone, a meeting place, a cushioning between the two empires of the Cold War. Imagine Alvar Aalto, so pro-American, having classes in America, with friends like the Rockefellers, and suddenly building the headquarters of the Communist Party. It was surprising, but simply, the Communist Party, like many others before, sought out the architect who could create a more potent icon, and Alvar Aalto undoubtedly did so with this extraordinary ceramic behemoth. Yes, with these sometimes serendipitous gestures, like the things they asked him for, there. And he would put the rooms in the baker, in this case. He had forgotten the projection booth, and then he said, "No problem," and added the projection booth as a sculptural element. People saw it as another stroke of genius from Alvar Aalto. Here are Alvar and Elisa in this stage of their lives, and as you can see, the Leger painting they ultimately had to buy is on the wall. It was a sweet moment, so sweet that he decided to build a studio. Near his home in the residential neighborhood of Helsinki where he lived, Alvar Aalto once again constructed a house for himself, or a studio. This studio served as a tool, a laboratory for changing architecture. The studio features a large arch that houses an auditorium with grassy terraces, although it has only been used a couple of times in its history. Nonetheless, it was meant to evoke the studio's communal nature. Today, it serves as the headquarters of the Alvar Aalto Foundation. And it was at that moment that he inaugurated the final Aalto, the tall, white, and monumental structure of his last works. Here he explored these new geometries that would culminate in a handful of works. I'll only mention a few because we're reaching the end of this journey. One of them is the Church of the Three Crosses in Imatra, near the border with Russia. Again, with a complex organization and plan, you see that kind of successive expansions. You see that the plan can expand successively so that if there are few people, the Lutheran church service can be held with enclosure and in privacy. And if more parishioners come, if more faithful come, then we open the different enclosures and we expand the space of the church. Through these enclosures that fragment the space of the church, there's a total sculptural space of the church with an unexpected luminosity. It's the most irrational, if you will, the most emotional of Aalto's works, The one that irritated the young people of that time the most, who said, "No, Aalto is not a rationalist architect. He's not functional. He's just whimsical. He's an unpredictable artist." And he began to lose favor with the youth, which worried him a lot. However, outside of Finland, he was an enormously admired figure once again. This church, the Three Crosses, with its altar organization inspired by the landscape, became so imitated that it began to be built all over the world. Particularly in Germany, Aalto built many buildings. Here, I've included the Neuerbarr in Bremen, a residential building with this fan-shaped plan that you see here. In its construction, he explored something that became very important. The new city centers were conceived as small acropolises. This is Aina Haki, entirely constructed by Alvar Aalto. Each building, like pieces in a still life, articulates the two most important elements. Of course, there's the town hall, once again designed in a U-shape to embrace a plaza. The step design evokes indeed the one he had previously done in Seinäjoki, with a large volume, again unnecessarily tall but evocative of the importance of the collective to engage in dialogue with the church tower. And the library, like so many others he would create, with the reading well, the fan-shaped floors and the sidelights that create that appearance of luminous clouds over the readers. And as he would later do almost at the Arctic Circle in Romania. In Me with another library, or much later in a place that belonged to him, Helsinki. You won't stop seeing it. It's the great academic bookstore, an extraordinary bookstore that he shaped again with a large patio with the skylight of these large glass rocks, and through which the light, so scarce in the northern latitudes, spills over those who visit the bookstore to buy. And we finally arrive at the end of his career, with a work he wouldn't see realized, a work he won in '59, the Essen Opera, which would be carried out 20 years later. Elisa would already be organizing it 20 years later, but I've only included an image so you know that in the Essen Opera, which he didn't get to realize in life, his last project was conceived. This is an image of the Essen Opera, and this is the last project. The Finlandia Hall's auditorium finally managed to build a large public building in Helsinki, his city. He conceptualized it with meticulous attention to detail, as depicted in the sketches of the hall, its section, and its decorative or evocative architectural elements. The way he grouped it together, and above all, what was present in his mind all the time, was Venice. Here he is in Venice, as you can see, with Mayor Gulliksen, his friend, and with Elisa, his wife, touring the rows of palaces along the Grand Canal. He wanted to do something similar. In Helsinki, he went with the master plan of creating a series of palaces around the Toholampi Bay. Just as in his youth, when he said he would create a Florence in Jyväskylä, now matured, he stated, "I will make a Venice in Helsinki." His grand and monumental Finlandia Hall, representing the Finlandia building initially with the auditorium section and later the Congress Wing addition, would be his final work. Perhaps not his finest, but certainly the most celebrated, as it was the old Aalto bequeathing to his city his ultimate creation, akin to Mies in Berlin or Frank Lloyd Wright in New York. And this is the image of the Finlandia Talo again, clad in Italian marble. What happened? The Italian marble worked very badly in the climate, in the northern climate, in all the marble plates they warped. They warped and they gave it this aspect that you see here. You may be able to see it in some of the images, a little like scales or bark, giving this building that wanted to be rhetorically classic, a romantic air, a vegetal air, a natural air, betraying Aalto's intention, which was to make a great classical building in Helsinki in the end. Unfortunately, the plates began to detach, the building filled with nets, and had to be reclad, but notice, the importance then of Aalto was shortly after his death. They would incorporate it into the banknotes of Finland. Now, unfortunately, they have the euro, so Alvar Aalto's banknotes have disappeared, but the front was Alvar Aalto, and on the back, the Finlandia tallow was already the icon, the work for which they wanted him to be remembered. And when after his death it came time to repair it because the marble plates were coming off, the politicians proposed something quite reasonable. They said, "Look, if granite works very well here, let's take a very light granite and clad it with granite, which will work." The architects got angry. They said, "Aalto did it in marble and it has to be marble, even if it only lasts another 20 years." And so it was done. It has been repaired and clad in marble again, knowing that it will have a short duration over time, and they will have to repair it periodically if they want to maintain that dream of that man from the north who dreamed of the south. At his death, Alvar Aalto was so determined indeed about the south, the Mediterranean, that his widow Elisa made improbable efforts to obtain a classical capital for his tomb. But there was no way to import it. The Italians said, "No, how can you import an antiquity? It's impossible." In the end, thanks to a friend, she managed to obtain a neoclassical capital from the 18th century, which is this capital, the one they have here, and the Italian authorities allowed its export, so at least she could achieve this. Let's see this final tribute that Elisa paid to Alvar Aalto. Alvar Aalto, indeed, a master who changed the course of architecture, introducing that organic architecture, including curves, introducing natural materials. But at the same time, he had many stages because there's a classic Aalto, and there's a functionalist and international style Aalto, and there's a brick Aalto, and there's a late white and monumental Aalto. There are many Aaltos. However, all of them are threaded by his nostalgia for the South. That architect who wanted, as I told you, to make a Florence in Jyväskylä and then wanted to make a Venice in Helsinki often said, "In my head, there is always a journey to Italy." When the time came for him to make the final journey, he would end up resting under an Ionic capital of Italian marble. In this chapter, we've delved into the architectural legacy and personal journey of Alvar Aalto, a master whose work transcended styles and borders. From his early functionalist works to his iconic organic designs, each of Aalto's projects was an expression of his deep connection with nature and his quest for harmony between form and function. Though his life was marked by challenges and ups and downs, his legacy endures as an inspiration for future generations of architects and design enthusiasts. Join us in the next chapter as we explore more about the visionaries who reshaped the architectural landscape. Don't miss it.